One thing that sets Traversal apart is our ability to predict and make bets, bold bets as to where the future of the models are going, and then work backwards from that at a 6-month timeline.
Welcome to InProd, conversations with founders and operators who are building the next wave of AI companies. We go deep on product execution, go-to-market, and the messy middle of building a business. If you're an aspiring founder, operator, or just startup curious, this is your inside look at how companies actually get built. Before we get to the episode, Laura and I are excited to announce a partnership with Overlap. Fresh out of Y Combinator's summer batch, Overlap is an AI-driven app that uses large language models to curate the best moments from podcast episodes. Imagine having a smart assistant who reads through every podcast transcript, finds the best parts or parts most relevant to your search, and strings them together to form a new, curated stream of content. That is what Overlap does. I personally use Overlap to explore content on future podcast guests and highly recommend it as another diligence tool for investors. Check out Overlap on the App Store today.
Today, we are joined by Anish, CEO of Traversal. Traversal is an AI-powered site reliability platform that automates root cause detection and remediation, helping teams reduce downtime and lighten the on-call burden. Welcome, Anish.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Are you still allowed to say it? I heard the Larry
According
David
to
rule.
Larry David, no more Happy New Year.
Yeah.
The question is just, what do you start your emails with?
I think happy holidays. Yeah.
Awesome. So you've worked across engineering, research, and now SRE tooling. What is the through line that connects all of that for you? Maybe just give a quick overview of your background.
Yeah, so my background, I'm from Singapore. I've been in the US 15 years, a lot of the time in technical institutions. So it's a Caltech fund. I spent a couple of years at BCG as a management consultant, and then went back to get my PhD in computer science at MIT. I think I just found AI to be something about 10 years ago that I just knew in my gut was going to be very important. And so I wanted to understand it a lot better than I did and loved it. I spent a lot of time thinking about it and wanted to keep doing it full time and felt being a professor is the best version of that. And so I was lucky enough to get a position at Columbia, New York City. And the way this company came about, I think I just felt that a lot of the great developments in AI and ML over the next 10 years are going to happen in companies, I think, with research in their DNA taking on very technical problems, right? That's where a lot of the magic is going to be. The best AI work is going to happen there. I think the most generational companies are going to start that way. And we've already seen that with the OpenAIs and Anthropics of the world. And so I want to be part of that. And so to answer your question in terms of the through line of what's connecting these different decisions, I think it's people at the end of the day. I think I just want to be around the best and be the person that's learning the most in any room. And I think each time I've gone into a career path, I felt like my gradient of learning has been very, very high. And that's how I tend to make career moves. And so I think just being in the best rooms, the most technical people is what I look for.
Super interesting background. I'm curious, with all that background, how you ended up on SRE as a focus area. And maybe give a sense for the audience a little bit on what Traversal does and sort of how you ended up focusing on this idea.
Yeah, so what Traversal is building is an AI site reliability engineer. So what that means practically is keeping your production systems reliable and up. That can take many forms. Probably the analogy I like to give is when you think about keeping your production systems up and healthy, the analogy I like to give is of healthcare, right? So imagine you're having a heart attack, right? Then the only thing that matters right at that point in time is to deal with the heart attack that you're having. And that's the equivalent in the world of SRE is having an incident. Like we saw a couple of the outages that happened last year that were quite public, like the AWS outage, right? So that's the equivalent of having a heart attack in software. And no one cares about anything else other than solving that problem. The next set of problems is what we call alert fatigue, alert triage, which is where imagine you have all sorts of sensors in your body and they're all emitting different things. Like this part of your system is a little bit higher than usual, but it's happening thousands of them a day. Which ones do you look at? Which ones of them are going to be actually predictive of an incident actually happening, right? That's the second part of the thing that we deal with. So the first one being when you have a large incident, you need to figure out what caused it and stop the bleeding. The second one is you have all of these different sensors in your system going off and you're figuring out which one of the thousands of that are going off that will be predictive. So that's what we call alert triaging. And the third one is the equivalent of, in the world of healthcare, will be, let's say, I don't know what the word is, like health hacking or whatever, where you're biohacking, that's the word, where you're trying to improve your long-term health as a person, right? Where you're making improvements, you're working out more, whatever you're doing, right? The equivalent in this world would be you're planning. You're planning what your infrastructure needs to look like over the next month, 2 months, 1 year, so that you are building for a way that the load that is going to come to your system in that time. Right. So those are the three kind of things that need to happen to make your system most reliable, from the most short term and pressing to the most long term. And we help with all three of those, which is incidents, alerts, and let's call it like long term infrastructure planning for resiliency. So that's what Traversal does as a company. And how did I get to this space? It's interesting because I remember when we started this company in Jan of 2024, 2 years and 5 days ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And when we actually started without an idea. So we actually had no clue what we wanted to solve, but we knew the type of problem we were looking for. So something at the intersection of our research that me and my co-founders had done in grad school and as professors. So the things that we really researched were, one is called causal machine learning. So the idea being that correlation isn't causation, as we've all heard, and so how do you get AI systems to pick up cause and effect relationships from data? They're very good at picking up minute correlations and not very good at picking up cause and effect relationships. That's one thing we studied. The second thing we studied is reinforcement learning, which is basically how do you search large spaces efficiently and effectively. And so we were trying to see how did that fit with agentic systems and what was the intersection of these things. And so we went through a few different ideas. And one of our co-founders, he's from Citadel Securities. And as you can imagine, uptime is super important in a company like that. And so he's the one who really got us in this problem. Actually, on our website, he has a little video of him talking about his first incident, which is really funny. So I encourage viewers to go listen to that. And as we looked into it, we felt that this is kind of like the perfect problem. Like we were designed to solve this problem in terms of like founder problem fit. Because at the heart of it, when you have a large software system, it's like a big network. And so when one thing goes wrong, everything tends to look like it's breaking, right? Because it's all interconnected. And so it's about kind of finding this needle in a haystack with many fake needles everywhere. That's exactly what our research was about. And this haystack is logs and metrics and traces and code, and that's what these LLMs are good at understanding. And it's petabytes of data, so you need an agentic system to search through it. So in terms of like the generational wave of tech and what we thought we'd be very good at, everything fit quite nicely. And in terms of the business, I mean, observability is just a beautiful business. It's an evergreen business. It produces, I think it's the business that's produced the most $5 billion plus liquid outcomes of any software category. So it's just a very good business to be in. And it's growing. I mean, I think the amount of data that we're producing, observability data, just keeps growing, right? And there just aren't enough SREs. Like if you look at the number of SREs in the labor force, it's kind of flat. And the amount of observability data is going up like this exponentially. And that's a problem, right? And then also with all of the AI generated code, it's actually making your surface area of your code bigger. It's making the amount of instrumentation. If you look at these coding agents, they actually produce a lot of instrumentation. And so it's making this problem even worse. But the number of SREs remains here, right? So 50x code increase, but there's still 50 to 100 people in every war room. Like that's just not going to work, right? So the why now felt very, very clear to us as well. So those are some reasons we decided this was a good problem for us to take on.
That's super interesting. I'm curious, I think anybody building an AI right now has to sort of have some predictions on what's going to be possible as models progress. And you getting started 2 years ago, the model ecosystem was in a very different place than it is today. What assumptions did you have to make, and how did you approach building the company knowing that there is sort of a factor out of your control in LLM scaling?
I think that's part of why, when I said earlier that having research in your DNA is important in this generation of company. I think we don't know where it's going. And so we, as a company, are reading papers, making bets of where the models are going to be 6 months from now, and then building for that, right? So like one big model bet that we made that was very good was reasoning models. So we architected things around the belief that reasoning models are going to get very good end of last year. And that was a huge unlock that happened to us around inference time compute. And then soon we re-architected everything this in summer under the belief that long horizon agents are going to be a thing. And they're now a thing. I'd say one thing that sets Traversal apart is our ability to predict and make bets, bold bets as to where the future of the models are going, and then work backwards from that at a 6-month timeline. It's very hard to predict more than that. And that comes from reading a lot of papers and being confident in trying things yourself in a very experimental way. And so I think creating the culture of producing production-grade software, but also being very experimental, I think is a new thing that is a skill set of this generation of startups. It's almost like having AWS, which is your core infrastructure, change every 6 months on you and also be a stochastic parrot, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's a weird world to build in. I think having a research background helps a lot in that process.
I also think it would be great to touch on the types of customers you're serving,
Yeah.
their needs, and how they're measuring Traversal today.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the success we've found so far has been with the large enterprises. So think of big financial services companies, e-commerce companies, healthcare companies in the Fortune 100. So we've certainly seen a lot of success there as one category. The reason being exactly what I talked about is that the data is growing very quickly. It's fragmented. So each of them is using like 7 different solutions. They're using Datadog and Splunk and Trace and Grafana and Elastic and God knows what, and a bunch of in-house built solutions as well. And so that fragmentation makes it a little bit more difficult to figure out what's going on because the context is now just not, it's trapped in this balkanized ecosystem of observability solutions and in different teams. Each team has very little context about what other teams are having. So the problem is very acute there and it's growing. And so I think that's one place we've seen a good amount of success, especially when you work with companies like financial services companies where every minute of downtime, it means something to them. And so they've invested a lot in the observability. And that's the other part of it is that I think it's a CIO level directive almost to be working with a company like Traversal at the Fortune 100 for a few reasons. One is they've seen success in the AI coding agent space. And I think there's this desire to have automation throughout the entire software development lifecycle. And they're also seeing the bottlenecks now start showing up in code review and software maintenance versus the coding development part of it. And so they need a solution like Traversal to actually unlock all of the efficiency gains that they're seeing from the coding agent space. Otherwise, it's kind of trapped. That's one reason. And second is over the last 10 years, a lot of these companies have invested, maybe overinvested in the observability, right? So they have a lot of metrics, a lot of dashboards, but not enough people actually see them, right? So they're actually getting value out of all of the investments that they've made into observability. So I think those two things have been very helpful for us as being a CIO level directive as to why the Fortune 100 style companies are working with us. And the second one would be the fast growing tech companies in the Bay Area. So let's say inference providers or where, reliability really matters and it's a core part of their differentiation. And they've had to grow quicker than they expected. And so now they're dealing with SLAs and customers churning if they don't actually, uptime isn't there. But they haven't built out a strong SRE team yet, right? Because that tends to come a little bit later in a company's journey. But they're forced to kind of grow up quicker than they expected. And so that's been another group that has a hair and fire problem, which is these fast growing Bay Area tech companies, especially infrastructure companies. Yeah, so those are the two groups we've certainly seen a lot of success with.
I'm curious, you mentioned AI coding and sort of the rise of these new agents writing some double-digit percentage of code in most organizations. I'm curious, has it changed the way you need to approach observability or the way, has it started to change the architecture of software in a way that introduces new types of observability challenges?
So for sure, the instrumentation has shot up, right? So I think that just made, if you think of this needle in a haystack analogy, the haystack is just way bigger than we expected. Second, I'd say the context that people have is a lot lower than before for any given part of the system. And so I think those are things that we have to contend with a lot. And then as a result of it, that then shows up in all sorts of other ways. So for example, as you think about at both at product level and infrastructure level. So when you have that much more data to look at, the part of it becomes an AI problem, but part of it becomes a core infrastructure problem. It's how do you actually search through petabytes of data and get back an answer in 2 minutes, right? And that requires you thinking about how do you re-index observability data to be friendly for agentic querying, right? So the way observability data has been structured, the databases that power it, the caching, all of it fundamentally is designed for it going up to a dashboard that humans look at, right? But that's now changing in this world where we no longer need, ideally, humans to look at a bunch of these dashboards and they can do more creative things with their lives. And so what you need is really an agentic system that can search through petabytes of data in a short period of time versus having very millisecond refresh rates for a given dashboard. So the entire infrastructure of the way you set up observability needs to change for this generation. So that's one big thing that we're seeing. Second is a mistake a lot of AI-SRE products are making right now is I consider them building faster horses, where if a human knows what to go look at, they will help you find that answer a little quicker. But I think in this new world with AI coding agents, people are not going to know what to look at. And so the way you design the product experience of how much human in the loop is there, when do you get feedback, I think it should be with the understanding that very soon, even now, people are actually not going to know what they need to look at, right? And so the agent needs to provide them all the information and help them kind of make easy decisions versus drive the system, right? So car versus faster horse. I think a lot of the AI-SRE products I'm seeing are faster horses versus a car.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Laura and I are thrilled to announce a partnership with Grata, an intuitive deal sourcing and diligence platform. Keep missing out on private market deals? Ditch the Rolodex and get Grata. Grata's AI-powered platform provides accurate data, deep insights, and time-saving workflows that help get more deals done. And it's trusted by over 500 firms and 3,000 deal makers, including myself. I've personally used Grata in both my deal sourcing and diligence workflows and would recommend their tool to any investor across private equity, growth equity, corp dev, or investment banking. We've negotiated a special offer for our audience. Mention PartnerPath to the Grata team during sign-up, and you'll get free executive seats for your partners and MDs included in your subscription. Now, back to the episode.
Do you think the constraint today, around adoption, is more on the human side and kind of educating folks and teaching them about this is the benefit, or do you think it's more on the AI side and what the model is capable of?
So I think the interesting thing about the world right now is I believe we're in a time where people are, we're getting meetings with CIOs of large banks that we should have no business talking to. I think the world is in a time where it's ready to change, right? I talked to one EVP of infrastructure and we pitched to him what we're doing at Traversal. And at the end of it, he's like, Anish, I've heard this pitch for 20 years now, that we're going to use AI to fix infrastructure.
Yeah, I remember the AI ops
Yeah,
era, where it's just we're going to take all your dashboards and put them in one dashboard.
That's right. So I heard this pitch before, okay, for 20 years now. But in this new age, I'm willing to open my heart up to love again. That's what he said to me. And so I think that's indicative of what's happening, which is that people are willing to take a bet right now. And I think it's incumbent upon us and other companies like ourselves to actually deliver. Because I think the bad case is there's too many pilots that are happening. People are actually pretty happy to run pilots. But there's so many failed pilots that I've seen now with companies that are just playing it fast and loose in how they go run these systems. And then you'll have this graveyard of companies where they'll be like, this whole category is nonsense, right? And so I think it's important to set expectations well and then exceed them versus just playing it fast and loose. But I do think people are willing to make a change. The other interesting thing is people in this space I've seen, even if someone has an unsuccessful pilot with someone, they'll still work with you because they understand how important the space is and that it's necessary to actually make software systems reliable in this new age. And so the capacity for people to try things has been high, which has been really good to see. And so I think there's certainly lots of challenges in the AI side that need to get solved to really solve this problem. I think the weird thing about it is that, let's keep the needle in the haystack analogy. I think you need an agentic system that is smart enough to search through this massive haystack and a data processing system that can actually crunch through all this data to get to the answer. We have been kind of building both of those things. The agentic layer is getting smarter and smarter, powered by better models and powered by our agent orchestration. The data processing system, which can now process more and more data than before. Before, when the systems weren't as mature, we had to manually kind of make the haystack smaller to allow to get to a good answer, right? Mm-hmm. One thing we've learned is people want a specific answer. They want something that they can quickly verify as being a correct answer or wrong answer. I think if you give them a very vague answer, like a high-level symptom, people are like, this is the amount of time it's going to take me to grok whether this is useful or not. I just might as well do what I was doing earlier. If you give them very specific answer, then they can quickly decide whether this is useful or not useful. So what we found is that getting as close to the needle is important. The goal then is to make the haystack smaller and smaller as if your agentic layer, data processing layer is not good enough. So as we've gotten better and better, we can search with less context. So rather than you having to specify it's this service or something or a specific date time, now you can just tell us things like, hey, these customers are having an issue, what's up, right? So it's a constant problem of AI and data. The better we get, the less context someone has to give us for us to get to a very specific answer.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, you mentioned proving value.
Yeah.
It's an interesting problem. I think we see it oftentimes in security where you run a POC with a company and you're a tool that's supposed to help them detect and respond to attacks.
Yeah.
And really the best way to figure out if the product is really working is if there's an active attack, which may be in a 3-week POC.
Yeah.
So I imagine the problem is somewhat similar with you guys in that I'm sure you're at your best when there's a pretty active incident at an organization, but how do you think about
Yeah.
sort of proving that ongoing value when there might not be a major incident at a customer?
So I'll give two answers. One, I actually think the go-to-market motion in security is quite different from observability. I think, as you said, in security, most of the time nothing's happening. Once in a while, you have this kind of incident that creates the fear of God in you. In observability, you actually do have incidents quite a bit, and you actually do have an answer, right? So I think there's more of a notion of like fear in security as you're selling, as you're thinking about the value of this thing.
Yeah.
In observability, it's you actually have an answer. So accuracy matters a lot, and best-in-class product tends to matter a lot as well, because you can actually measure the accuracy of what's happening. Because it's incidents, you may not have a Sev1 AWS level outage every day, but you have incidents all the time. If there's 50 plus customers being affected, most companies would consider that an incident, and there is an actual answer for that, right? And so you have like lots and lots of postmortems and historical incidents to backtest on. So that's one key difference, is typically in observability, there is an answer, there is an incident, versus in security, typically there isn't, it's deflecting off false positives for the most part. That's one. The second is, a big part of our product evolution has been around this point, which is that I think the most important thing for like the executive buyer, the thing that connects to the bottom line the cleanest way is incidents, right? So complex incidents, and that's also where I think the biggest technical moat in our industry is. So we focused on that to begin with. Over time, we realized that it's probably not a very good product experience if someone's using your product for the first time during an incident, right? You want them to be familiar with your product and comfortable with it in peacetime when something isn't wrong. And that's why we release some of the other product lines that we have that I talked about earlier. One is being, let's say, alert triaging, because that's a manual thing you're doing every day, where you're going through, someone's on call is looking through a set of hundreds of alerts, maybe, and saying these are the 5 that matter. So that triaging work is something that we do now as well. And that's kind of like the daily paper 1,000 cuts kind of thing. And the other one is people go to a platform like Datadog every morning, like twice a day, right? Even when nothing is wrong, just to get a sense of what their system looks like. How does it feel? Does it feel like things are okay, or does it seem like something is off? That interaction with your system through dashboards, we believe you can just do in a far better way now with agentic systems. And so even in peacetime, you can start bringing people proactively sets of queries that they can run, right? Or just the answers to what is going wrong in their system or what could go wrong in their system, to give them like an agentic health check of their system, right? So that becomes almost like a daily toothbrush style, twice a day use case that we're going after as well. Because we want people to be using the product daily versus having to use it once every 3 weeks. I think for the executive buyer, once every 3 week type incident is what comes up to them. But you have to kind of get love from both the executive buyer and also the daily user. And so these product lines collectively, I think, do that.
Do you see a future where the agents start to take action on behalf of the users, where there's so much trust in the system, like they've already been checking it every day for a year, that it's more like an automatic loop? Or do you think there'll always be like a human there?
So we're already doing that, actually, where the system is taking action. Think of it as there's a set of like whitelisted commands that a company lets you run, like restart a pod, scale some piece of your infrastructure, roll back a commit. So mitigation tasks, so rather than think of it as a long-term like fix of your entire software system, it is something that kind of stops the bleeding in the moment. And they have thousands of these different like automation scripts to heal their system that they give us access to. That they know that if you did that, it's not going to break the system by any means, right? So we typically, once we have shown value and high accuracy with incidents, alerts, whatever, then they typically give us access to these whitelist set of commands that we can run to heal the system. So that typically comes as phase 2, but that is in production with a number of companies that we work with. And increasingly, we are also exposing ourselves to like an MCP server to like things like coding agents. So they can use us to give them almost like a much higher fidelity view of your entire production system environment. So then if a coding agent wants to take an action or something, they can use this as a way to gain context on what's happening in the system in a much more high fidelity way than having to query the Datadog MCP, which, it doesn't give you that much.
As you guys move more in this direction, how do you think the role of the SRE changes?
I think going back to like the healthcare analogy, right? I think right now the role of an SRE is dealing with 2 heart attacks and your sensors going off, 2 heart attacks a week and false positive from your sensors 20 times a day. Like that's the life of an SRE. But if you talk to SREs, at least from what I've seen, their goal is to build resilient infrastructure, right? That's what they want to do. And they want to put like really nice processes in place that allow developers to be efficient, right? And I think they keep getting pulled into this like these incidents and alerts that stop them from doing the thing that they actually love, which is building resilient infrastructure. So our hope is that as Traversal gets very good at what it does, then this work, this reactive work around incidents and alerts and like your daily system health check, we can deal with that. And they just trust Traversal to deal with that. And then they're spending their time in the more creative parts of the job, which is like long-term system design. And how do you think about the long-term health of your system and plan around for that, right? I think that's our goal as a company and our vision for what SREs should be doing and platform engineers and that the general field.
Yeah. Effectively, they move more towards like architecture and architecture design than sort of firefighting. That makes a ton of sense.
I think we would be remiss in the middle of these AI wars not to bring up how good of a job you've done with hiring. I mean, you've quickly scaled a team. You're up to
65.
65. Okay. So I didn't even have the updated number. I think it would be great to touch how you thought about team building. You're based here in New York. And if there's any tips or tricks you would have for founders, given that it's really competitive to get the types of engineers you want. And I'm sure you've built out probably some go-to-market at this point as well.
Yeah, I think we've been lucky having a really world-class engineering team and a pretty world-class go-to-market team that is coming together as well. I think that the number one thing that ties everyone to this company is everyone loves the problem. Like every day people are like locked in and trying to solve this problem. I think this is a problem that engineers hate in some ways and love to solve. And it's a very difficult technical problem that requires you thinking about AI. Like I think we're really at the cutting edge of what agentic architectures look like. But also I think it's cool. Like we have a data processing team that is thinking about how do you process petabytes of data. And they put together an architecture. And 3 days later, Carnegie Mellon there's a paper that came out of Carnegie Mellon that did the same thing, right? So they really are at the edge of how we think about next-gen data processing systems as well. And so I think that's a pretty addictive feeling for people, that what they're doing is really at the edge of things, because that we see the market and we say, oh, okay, we did that a month ago. So that's like a very cool feeling for people. So I think a love of the problem and feeling like you're at the edge of what's possible is very interesting. And I think one thing we've been thinking a lot about as a company is how do you create a winning culture in a company? And that's been an interesting problem, because I think that again leads to like a virtuous circle where people are like enjoying the wins and you double down and you win more. And so I think that's getting that momentum going is really important in a company. And you know, we're an in-office company, and when people come into the office, you can just feel the buzz, I think. And I think somehow creating that energy is really important. In-office culture helps a lot with that, because people can feel that energy when they walk in the room. And I think they know that we're solving the problem. We're actually trying to solve the problem. We're not trying to have a smoke and mirrors. Like we really are loyal to the problem and trying to solve it in the right way. And I think people respect that and want to be part of that team. It's also it's a very interesting mix of people, right? You have like researchers who've come from academia. You have that. We also have SREs. We have, I think, what we call the world's first SRE researchers. So a few people who have come from who are really good SREs who are now part of the research team, troubleshooting, learning workflows, trying to get the AI to do that. And so it's like you have SREs and you have like these PhDs from Berkeley, like sitting together. It's like a very interesting mix and energy, which is really fun. And then you have like high frequency traders. You have people from like the ServiceNows and Datadogs of the world. And so I think it's just a very interesting crew of people that maybe not otherwise would not find a reason to be together. And I think that's been really cool for the team as well. Yeah, I'd say those are some of the reasons. But honestly, we've been lucky with it. Good investors help too. I think that is like certainly when you're early in your journey, that's social proof that early engineers look for.
Yeah, maybe that's a good segue to say congrats on raising a seed in Series A from Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins. I'd love to hear a bit about what surprised you in the fundraising process, and perhaps any assumptions that changed as you've worked with those investors around sort of your approach to building this company.
I couldn't have asked for a better set of investors. It's been a privilege working with them. They're actually very patient investors. So they typically are like, Anish, you got to slow down, build the foundation right, because I'm trying to go at 1,000 miles an hour. So they've actually been very good at making sure that the foundations of the company are correct, so that we scale quickly. And I think over time I've come to trust their opinion a lot as to when, because in a startup we're always trying to figure out when do you push versus when do you kind of solidify, because you can always put too many chips on the table and then you might be out. So you got to like figure out the right balance of those things. And I've tended to trust their opinion a lot as time has gone on. And I think they really are like company builders. So like they are in it with me and us. Like I don't think of them as like evaluating me. I think of them as like, I just tell them what's going on, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I feel they're part of it. So I think developing the trust early is important, and over communicating almost early is important, especially with some of these firms. You might feel intimidated. You don't want to tell them anything that's wrong that's happening. I kind of built the muscle of telling them the thing that's wrong first. I think that's really valuable to build like a good relationship. In terms of fundraising, it's funny. We did our Series A about a year ago, and we did all of the ICs basically in one day. We're just going up and down Sandal Road.
It's the old school way.
And it felt very nostalgic, strangely, because as a professor, going into like a room and like going to investment committee, and all these people kind of sit around, and then you have like the older general partners, you have like the young associates, and like this whole thing. It felt exactly like when I was giving my job talks for professorships. Like you'll get in the middle, and then the old professors will come sit in the first row, the assistant professors behind them, the grad students behind them, and you have this 1 hour to kind of do your thing. And you can kind of feel the energy of the room go up and down. You kind of have to like control it. It's the same with IC. Like it'll go well, and someone might ask one question, they kind of spiral, so you can like recover it. So it actually felt really good. I felt very alive, and it felt like something I'd done before. It's just good storytelling, in my opinion. It felt very familiar. And I think with fundraising, I don't know, different people have different opinions on how to do things. I found it's best to build relationships with VCs all the time versus like hide, and then come out once. And then I think in the end, there's numbers and all this stuff, but in the end, it becomes an emotional gut decision. And that, for you and for the investor, only gets refined over time as you spend time with them. And so that's been my opinion of how to do. You got to build relationships, and I like VCs. I like people like yourself. Yeah.
Well,
Thank
you. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like for you guys, trust with your customers and trust that you're going to be able to actually fix their system seems to really be at the core of the company. And I found that companies that operate that way, you can sort of predict how a founder will act with investors by the core message and value that they're trying to convey in their product as well. I mean, I think we see it oftentimes we work with a compliance company called Drata, and literally in every sentence that the CEO Adam puts out, he's talking about trust. And I remember when we were working on the deal, the most important thing beyond how many introductions we can make is just like, can we build trust with you guys as an organization? Because that's sort of what's central to the company. And I find that when companies actually make those values central, it reflects even in the way that they interact with investors.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
So now we're at 2 years. I mean, if you could go back or do anything differently or pull any lessons from day one, is there anything that you would do?
I think it's not bad, but I feel like I'm still kind of in the honeymoon period of this company building. Like it's been a reasonably straightforward 2 years. I'm certain it's going to get rocky soon. So far, it's gone quite smoothly. I think the thing that if I take a step back as to what I or as an organization we could have done better, I think, at the start of the company, you are 2-3 people in a room. And so you can keep changing decisions like every day, right? I think as the company grows and suddenly becomes 50 people or 60 people, then I think you need to think of everything you're doing as a series of bets, right? As to where it's going to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, and you're planning for that. I think that took me some time to figure out, right? It's like you have to start hiring, for example. Like, are you building capacity for today? Are you building capacity 6 months from now? Whether it comes to engineering, whether it comes to sales reps, whatever it might be. That mindset and not doing something is also a bet, right? And so inaction is just as much a bet as actually making, a bold decision. And I think that mindset took a while for it to kind of really get embedded in me. So I'd say that's the biggest thing, is thinking about your company as a series of bets, and how as the company grows, the bets you're making are over a longer horizon.
Yeah. That makes sense. One final question before we hop into the quick fire round. Given that you have primarily a research background, I know that you were a consultant as well, but how did you think about developing the commercial skill set and the sales motion, given that you probably weren't formally taught that?
Honestly, I just love sales. I think I didn't realize. And I think also the things I enjoyed a lot about research tie a lot with sales in some ways. Like a lot of it comes down to figuring out the right story that you're telling, right, to your end user, and crafting the right message that sticks quickly, right? So it's like I feel like a lot of research is like an interesting mix of product marketing and sales, just with a totally different language, but it fits quite nicely that way. So I think I naturally really enjoy being around customers, and I enjoy selling, because selling is really about listening, I think, right? Because you're like listening to your customers, understanding what they need, and seeing what generalizes across people, right? And so I think I've come to love it a lot. I like salespeople a lot too. I think sophisticated enterprise infrastructure sellers are incredible group of people. Yeah, I think they're an interesting mix of really good listeners and killers. And I think I like that setup. And I think, I mean, I'm a student of lineages, right? So in academia, there's lineages of professors and their professors and like who advisors and advisees, and you kind of can map it, right, for different fields, how that came to be. That was one of the things I really enjoyed about academia. Turns out it's a similar thing in sales. There's different like lineages of sales organizations and how they've kind of grown over the years, like from the PTC days of Jan McCann, and then there was like the EMC, and there's the App Dynamics, and there's MongoDB, and like Grafana. So you see these kind of lineages, and I really enjoy that. And so that's been part of like my enjoyment of it as we build out the sales team. It's learning lineages of excellence. Yeah, so it's just been being a student of it, I guess. Yeah.
Do you want to hop in? Quick fire round?
Sure.
Okay, what's the most underrated skill for a first-time founder?
So I'm thinking, what's the most underrated skill for a first-time founder? Recruiting.
Okay. Is there a productivity trick you swear by?
Swearing the small things.
Is there an engineering habit you wish more teams adopted?
Making sales calls and customer calls a part of their weekly feedback sessions.
If not SRE, what area would you be building in?
Building core data processing systems for agentic companies.
Awesome. Well, that's all we got for you. Thanks, Anish.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
It's fun.